Hello, welcome to Pursuit of a Perfect System. The speakers in this video are excellent, and those speakers are the Acoustic Energy AE300s, and they are the 6th speaker in a 9 under £650 stand mount group mega test that I'm doing to find the best stand mount speaker in this price category. And if that sounds of interest to you, make sure you subscribe to the channel and join our larger community. This review of the Acoustic Energy AE300 is going to be all about comparisons to the other 5 speakers I've reviewed in this group test so far: the Wharfedale EVO 4.2, the Klipsch RP600M, the Bowers & Wilkins 606, the Q Acoustics 3030i, and the SVS Prime bookshelf speakers. And make sure you've seen all of those reviews as well as this one. Now, straight away, what I find really very interesting about the Acoustic Energy AE300 is just how well they nestle and settle their way in between all of these other different speakers. None of these speakers so far in this group test are the same. There are some similarities, but they all offer something unique and different. My first impressions of the AE300s, well, I didn't really have any, because this is the first time that I've listened to any Acoustic Energy speakers. And I think given the form factor and small dimensions and small size of the AE300 probably did give me some preconceptions of how I thought they might sound, and I definitely didn't expect them to sound anything like as good as they do. Now, in terms of setting them up, I placed them in a very similar position to how I had the last speakers set up in this group test, and I started listening to them, and very quickly I worked out that there were some good things going on, but things just didn't sound right. The sound was quite soft, it was a bit flat and a bit one-dimensional. So I got busy and worked on the towing of the AE300s, and I ended up settling on a very aggressive towing for them, way more aggressive than any other speakers that I've set up in this group test, and I think any other speakers that I've had in my review listening room to date. And you know what? It's what works for that particular speaker and that particular situation, and this definitely worked for me. And when it came time to measure the response, or the frequency response in my room, you can see that, yeah, my ears told me a very good truth, because the AE300s measure fantastically well, and they are pretty linear throughout their mid-range and their treble. And if we compare to the SVS Prime bookshelf speakers, 2 things stand out. Now, the SVS Prime bookshelf speakers measured fantastically linear, so they're a great speaker to compare the AE300 to. And the AE300 measure almost as linear, but we can see a very interesting frequency dip in the presence region, which is very interesting. And there was also a slightly more rolled off and a slightly earlier rolled off treble, and both of those 2 key characteristics very stand out in the graphs, and they also indicate 2 key areas where these speakers sound really rather different. But I want to start by talking about the treble delivery from the AE300, because it is pretty damn faultless for speakers around this price point. It's clean, it's composed, and in the main it's very stress and grain free. And I actually think it's the sweetest sounding treble from any of the speakers that I've listened to and reviewed so far in this group test. Very stand out in that regard. And the reason it stands out is because, yeah, it's sweet, but it's not overly softened, and that is a really quite nice but difficult balance and trick for a speaker designer to pull off. There is less treble presence than speakers like the Klipsch RP600M and the Bowers & Wilkins 606, but again, it's not softened and it's never lost within the soundstage. What's really interesting, I think, comparing the AE300 to the Q Acoustics 3030i, both of them are about the same height in terms of their speaker size, and I felt with the Q Acoustics 3030i that maybe they would be better suited sat on top of taller speaker stands. Well, the AE300 proved to me that really it's not the height of the speaker that dictates things like the height and overall space within a soundstage, because that's all delivered by the treble, and the treble delivery from the AE300 presented a very open and a very clear and quite a tall overall soundstage. And in a lot of ways, that is a very good thing. And when you combine that with how the mid-range is delivered from the AE300s as well, that does make up a bit of a characteristic of a speaker, which has benefits for certain types of music, but some trade-offs and maybe some negatives for other styles of music. Now, just as an example, something like the Klipsch RP600M with its more present treble, and I think the SVS Prime bookshelf speakers do it the same, is that in certain music, raspy sounding instruments like your trumpets and similar will come through much more raspy on those speakers, the Klipsch RP600M and the SVS Prime bookshelf speakers, than they do on the Acoustic Energy AE300. So there is some trade-off of treble and just overall soundstage intensity for that smooth and mellow and musical treble. So, you know, each audiophile will pick their preferred poison in that regard. And the mid-range and the vocals from the AE300, they follow a similar suit really to the treble. It's very clean, it's a very precise sounding mid-range that has a really impressive warmth and organic character to it. And I don't really remember hearing that organic character from the mid-range of any of the speakers in this group test for a while. I think I have to go back to when I reviewed the Wharfedale EVO 4.2 to get that kind of mid-range from a speaker in this category on this price group test so far. But the EVO 4.2 deliver their mid-range and vocals very different to the AE300. The Wharfedale EVO 4.2 are very big and they're very lively and they're very energetic with their vocal and mid-range delivery, where the AE300 is more reserved sounding, but again, very focused, very tight, very controlled. And again, it has that lovely organic musical character about it, which makes them stand out. And going back to talking about the differences between the AE300 and the SVS Prime bookshelf speakers. And in the review of the SVS Primes, I spoke about how impressed I was by their mid-range delivery in terms of being very technically accurate, and I felt like they was giving me all the information that was on the disc, that was on the files, and I was very impressed by that. But I also felt that that mid-range was quite matter of fact sounding, and when you compare them to the Acoustic Energy AE300, it shows me that I was exactly right to think that about those speakers, because the AE300 deliver their vocals and mid-range in not quite as clinical accuracy type of way, but very, very close, but they do it in a much more relaxed, easygoing, mellow and musical way, and that makes them a much more engaging speaker to listen to, and really an easier speaker to listen to. And I think probably the highest praise that I can give to the Acoustic Energy AE300 is that their vocals and mid-range sounded Harbuff-like. Not quite the same, but they reminded me of listening to smaller Harbuff speakers, and considering the price point of these AE300s, that's really very high praise. And that is a key characteristic of how the Acoustic Energy AE300 sound. The mid-range and vocal is more reserved sounding than maybe 3 or 4 of the other speakers that I've listened to so far in this group test, but I really don't mind that. It actually just works really well. It suits how the overall sound from this speaker is delivered, and it's all part of that overall speaker's sound balance. Moving on to bass, and yeah, I think the bass is the Achilles heel of the AE300, and we have to be realistic in our expectations of a speaker of this physical size. But given their physical size, they do really try hard. They do really try to be, I think, bigger sounding in bass than you would expect from a speaker of that size. And after I did a custom Dirac Live calibration on them, they was delivering a fairly good and fairly satisfying bass. Comparing the bass quality that they delivered compared to something like the SVS Prime bookshelf speaker, a speaker of a similar physical size, I think the bass quality from the AE300s was higher. They are slightly more substantial sounding in their bass, and there was no port noise or port chuffing from the AE300 like I could hear from the SVS Prime bookshelf speakers. Comparing them to the Acoustic's 3030i, which is a bigger speaker, it's a deeper speaker, and yes, the 3030i do give out a more perceived substantial bass, but the AE300 delivers a much tighter and a much more controlled and articulate bass compared to the Acoustic's 3030i, and it's a bass more in line, more akin with the Bowers & Wilkins 606, but probably not as substantial as those. And the bass is definitely not as substantial and as sure-footed as the bigger speakers in the group test, like the Klipsch RP600M and the Wharfedale EVO 4.2. So if a really big bass is what you're after from speakers at this price point, then some of the others in this group test will serve you better, but not everybody is looking for that. So if you are looking for a tight and I would say accurate and tuneful and on point bass, then that is what you get from the AE300s. The overall soundstage size, space, width is very impressive from the AE300s, and the general quality of their imaging within the soundstage, the precision of it all, and the space and the layout of the individual elements of music is really extremely impressive. Yes, you will get a bigger and more expansive sounding soundstage presentation from speakers like the Wharfedale EVO 4.2, and a more lively and come at you sound presentation from the Klipsch RP600M. But one thing that really impressed me with the AE300s after the aggressive towing was their dimensionality, the sound that kind of becomes more three-dimensional between you and the speakers, and sometimes beyond the speakers, because that is where they were extremely impressive in terms of knitting an overall soundstage together, and then that clarity and precision of the different layers and elements of the music kind of being forwards and backwards within this overall soundstage with excellent dimensionality was really very impressive, and at least as good as any of the other speakers that I've reviewed in this group test so far. That bit was really very impressive. And overall, I think the AE300s are a really tight and focused sounding speaker system, and it seems to me like Acoustic Energy have paid some key attentions to detail with the AE300s. I'm assuming with the cabinet construction and the important things like critical and key components within a crossover to allow them to sound like they do. However, what I did find with the AE300s is that I was turning the volume up more to give me the same perceived dynamic, the same perceived impact from the music compared to all the other speakers in this group test. I think that's just something to bear in mind. Not a huge amount more, but a noticeable amount more for all the music. And I think that ties in with, again, the overall character of this speaker being on the slightly more reserved and mellow side of things. That allows you to turn it up more and I suppose be involved more in the music, but it also shows me that I think there is a slight trade-off with the AE300s. There's a trade-off of maybe intensity, excitement and dynamics for a clean, crisp and composed, relaxed, mellow and organic sound. So yeah, they don't quite do all of it, they don't quite do everything, but the bits that they do are very good and very impressive. But I think that will probably make them speakers of interest to a lot of audiophiles, and maybe there'll be other speakers that other audiophiles will prefer as a result. When it comes to looks and when it comes to build quality, the Acoustic Energy AE300s are definitely speakers your wife will say yes to without hesitation. They are nice and they are elegant, and the finish quality on them is really very impressive. It almost feels plastic-like. It must just have lots of layers of paint and lots of layers of finish to give them that kind of plastic feel. The Acoustic Energy AE300s cost £599, which is about £50 more than the Bowers & Wilkins 606, about £300 more than the Q Acoustics 3030i, and about the same price as the SVS Prime bookshelf speakers. As I mentioned at the beginning of the review, all of these speakers are offering something different, and the AE300 sits itself in between the other speakers, but also stands out for certain key reasons. And those key reasons could definitely be the reasons why certain audiophiles will choose them. And I think they are good enough, or more than good enough, to stand up on their own and for you to take serious attention of them or give them serious consideration when you're shopping for speakers at this price point, if you're looking for the key strengths that I've discussed with you in this review. So for my final thoughts of the Acoustic Energy AE300s, yeah, they have won me over as a speaker system, and they've been a fantastic introduction to Acoustic Energy as a speaker manufacturer, because they have shown me that Acoustic Energy can make really good speakers. The AE300s are not perfect, and I think when I look at it, they don't do anything wrong. They only do things right. There's no standout characteristic where I can say that they don't deliver. Actually, they are a speaker and a product, I think, of their physical size, with a lot of clever and critical attentions to detail paid, so that a speaker of that size delivers the best it can at that price point. And that's really very impressive to me. And if you want more bass, you can always add subwoofers. We already all know that. And they have got me very, very interested in Acoustic Energy's new AE520 flagship speakers. Very, very interested in those. So I hope this video has been enjoyable, helpful, and useful. And don't forget, there are 3 other comparison reviews coming and 5 other comparison reviews, all in the channel, making up this 9 speaker group mega test. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Take care.